Hey everybody, welcome to another Jervis Forum, Frontiers of International Security. I'm Joe Parent, at the University of Notre Dame, and joining us today for a homecoming is Professor Christopher Fettweis. We're lucky to have Chris. He writes on a whole bunch of topics, but unlike most academics, he writes well, in a way that doesn't cure literacy. So, Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And you can write on a lot of topics if you don't worry about being right. If the scope is pretty broad there.
Stay in school, kids. Um, Chris is going to be talking to us today about the future of warfare. Chris, tell me why you're fired up about the future of warfare.
I think it's important to know and important for everybody out there who is thinking about these issues that the future is kind of bright. You hear constantly that the future is going to be even worse than the present, and people talk about how terrible the present is. You hear all the time about how this is the most dangerous period of our lifetime. Old people will say that who have had a longer lifetime than us and have more perspective, presumably. But they constantly say you constantly hear images in the media. You see photos and images from Gaza and Ukraine, how terrible life is now and how terrible the planet is getting. It's not true. It is true that we're living in very dangerous times, but unless you compare it to any time before, it seems pretty dangerous. It's dangerous except for all the other times that have happened before.
The Churchill definition of future of war.
Yeah, that it's not going to be probably as bad as you think or as good as I think. It'll be somewhere in the middle. But we have much less conflict in the world now than ever before.
So what do you think people take the perception is always that this is rotten and the grass is greener?
Yeah, I don't know. Perhaps part of it is peace is boring. And we tend to turn on those pieces of information that seem more exciting, seem more action-packed, seem more violent. And the old expression in the media, if it bleeds, it leads. So we turn on our phones, we turn on the TV, and you see terrible stuff all the time. But that's not the average experience of more people around the world than ever before. There's this belief that things are going in a direction that is inherently violent. There's 8 billion of us now, Joe. 8.3 billion of us. And it seems that way when you're sitting in traffic. I don't know how much traffic's in South Bend. We don't actually have traffic in New Orleans.
What is this traffic of which you speak?
Yeah, I used to live in traffic places. It seems maybe more than that to the people sitting in traffic. 8.3 billion.
There's more traffic now, right, Chris?
I want to talk about traffic and the future of traffic.
The future of traffic?
South Bend has roundabouts now. I think they're cutting edge roundabouts.
People think there's no progress.
I imagine a lot of people don't know what to do at roundabouts, though, and probably in rush hours things get
A little hairy.
when
Yeah.
it comes back to war. Think people remember the past as being better than it was, including the Cold War. We've had chairmen of the Joint Chiefs who will talk about how now the current state of affairs is the worst, the most dangerous they've ever had in their lifetime.
Are you going to name any names?
Well, maybe some people who have visited Notre Dame pretty recently.
I don't know who you're talking about other than Martin Dempsey.
Was he sitting in this chair before? Or
No, he wasn't.
You blew you off.
No, good guy here. Lovely person.
He thinks the world is more dangerous than ever. And the world is dangerous unless you compare it to any time that came before, when it was much, much more dangerous. We've had 110 billion of us who have lived on the planet. Most of them have had to worry about their neighbors coming in, carting off their women, making them pay taxes to their king, the new god. We don't have to worry about that stuff. Conquest is essentially dead. Here's today's trivia question for you, Joe. Ready?
Ready?
How many UN members have disappeared from the map?
Oh, I suck at trivia. Two.
Zero. The closest we got, South Vietnam, which was always kind of a BS country anyway, and it was never a full UN member. No UN member has ever disappeared, absorbed by its neighbors. Some of them have collapsed on their own accord, but none of them have been conquered. Don't have any conquest anymore. Nobody cares. Nobody's any happier. Everybody thinks things are going to hell. That's constant. Always people think now is terrible. You go back to the 90s, people thought this is the most dangerous, complex, unpredictable era ever. It was pretty predictable.
Here I thought it was special, and now it turns out I'm just as concerned as everyone else. And there was 100 million of me before, or 100 billion.
110 billion of it.
Ah.
Yeah. And nobody is happier about people are living longer, they're living healthier, everything driving is safer, crime is down, warfare, number and magnitude of wars way down. And yeah, there's ethnic conflict and civil war, but there was ethnic conflict and civil war throughout history. My favorite little comment, James Woolsey, is going to be he was the former head of the CIA, and his confirmation hearing says during the Cold War there was a dragon in the forest, and we slayed that dragon, but it's been replaced by thousands of poisonous snakes. And the snakes are more dangerous than the dragon ever was. What Woolsey didn't realize, there was always snakes in the forest, but nobody noticed the snakes because of the dragon. And then we got rid of the dragon. Everyone said, "Oh my God, look at the snakes." We're always going to elevate new snakes to take the place of the old dragons. As we solve one problem, we elevate nine more.
True story. So my dad was a regular doctor,
Mhm.
and he got a call into his office on average every 2 minutes, which is people were handling. And
Right.
the only day there wasn't a phone call was September 11th. And he's like, it's not like people stopped getting sick; they just had a bigger problem.
Yeah, okay, right.
But it totally comports with what you're saying. It seems like a perfect hydraulic theory of people's concerns. Like there will always be something
Something gets
that,
elevated to
yeah,
because for some reason, there's something in all of us that needs to be worried. We have to think we're the good guy, part of it is. And so there has to be bad guys out there waiting to try to get us.
right.
And it's always dangerous. It's always complex, except if you look at the math and compare it to any time before, which all of our ancestors would trade places to be in our seats right now. Maybe not quite as close as we are right now.
Sure,
Your
yeah.
ancestors are,
It's actually like a booth here. We're
yeah,
really crammed in here.
yeah. But a lot of our ancestors would still be in these chairs because then you walk out to a basically peaceful world.
Yeah. All right. So talk to me about the past of the future of
Yeah.
war. So the trajectory, the frequency and magnitude of war, and how people imagine the future of war.
Back when before we had 1 billion people, and there was a substantially larger number of wars than there were now. Jefferson always used to talk about Europe as an arena of gladiators, and we should stay away from. They love to fight. The Germans, my people, right now, are the most peaceful people on the planet. That's weird. That's not usually we're bad neighbors, the Germans. They're the most peaceful people. Europe is totally at peace except its far eastern portion. And it's about as far away from the United States as you can get almost. We still worry about it obsessively. But Europe is the most peaceful, most boring part of the world in a lot of ways. So maybe we need something to activate our minds to keep us worrying about something. When war between the French and the French and the Germans now, it's pretty much unthinkable. Your old mentor Robert Jervis talked about how the French and the Germans don't even plan for war against one another anymore. That's new. That's weird. But nobody appreciates it. Things are better than they have ever been, and they're likely to continue to get better. At least if I was in Las Vegas and had to gamble on the number of wars 10 years from now, my guess is it's probably there'll be some. There's always some bad actors. Yeah, somebody's killing somebody somewhere, but it's better than it used to be, and it's probably going to continue to get better.
So if you could be born in any year,
Hmm.
you would up to 2100 or 2200,
Hmm.
you'd be born in 2100 or 2200. You'd
I
prefer to be born way later.
I had a historian friend of mine who was asked if you could go back to any time before and live, when
Yeah.
would you go back? He said about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Because if any time before, we don't one of my little favorite little stats, 3 billion flies were born in New York every day and then 100 years ago because of the number of horses and the amount of horse dung in the streets of
Yeah, it
New
was like
York.
6 inches per day of just horse shit.
3 billion flies were
Yeah.
born every day in New York. There's a lot of bad things about New York. That's not one of them. We're doing better. And there was more crime, and life expectancy much shorter. So yeah, I'd like to be. Yeah, AI scares everybody, and people of a certain age don't really understand what the hell is going to happen.
Yeah.
People of a certain age saw the Terminator,
Yeah.
so we know it could happen. But life is going to be better. I tell students all the time, you'll hear this is the first generation is going to do worse than their parents. They said that about our generation.
Yeah. Robots were going to take our jobs
Yeah,
in kindergarten.
they're going to do better than we did.
Yeah.
And their kids are going to do better than them.
Okay, so why do you think that's so?
We just learn stuff as a species. We're not quite as stupid as I often think we are.
Yeah.
And we learn and we get better. We learn, for instance, that slavery probably isn't right. A lot of times
Not a good idea.
it
Morally wrong.
maybe it comes back. It just seems unlikely that
Yeah.
someday we're going to say we're going to build a society based on slave labor. Yeah, there's a lot of slaves around the world now, but it's in the criminal periphery. The people are working against their will for free. But it's unlikely it's going to come back. And there's a lot of when you make moral progress, when people learn, when people have decided that institutions are out of date, colonialism, witchcraft, dueling, things that probably aren't coming back. Maybe war's one of those. Maybe we're moving to an area. Yeah, there's still going to be war. It'll be in the criminal periphery. And it won't be the center part, maybe, of the future of international politics. Maybe it will. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the realists are right and war's on the war becoming back. We can't rule out human nature is flawed. We're too stupid or aggressive or greedy. And maybe there's a popular left wing or right wing populism coming to the fore that's going to change everything. But if you're a gambling person, and half the country is now, Joe, they all dump their money into sports gambling.
Or investments.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the smart ones are investments. All the rest of us blow it on Saturday in the fall. However, if you're betting on warfare, I wouldn't bet that there's going to be a third world war anytime in our lives. And if I'm wrong, we'll all be dead and no one will be able to come after me.
Okay, so let me make the Bob Jervis case.
Yes.
In a famous 2002 APSA presidential speech,
Yes.
Jervis said, look, peace is caused by many factors.
Yeah.
The sort of realist story about deterrence, that's part of it, but it's the minority part of it.
Hmm.
You sort of have a constructivist story about changing norms, which
Yeah.
is the John Mueller story. You have this changing liberal story, which is about the rise of democracy,
Yeah.
the rise of international institutions, the rise of trade.
Yeah.
Now, on Jervis grounds, the only part of that web of peace that's holding is the deterrence part in most of the world. And sort of the rise of the right and the democratic backsliding and more protectionism and international institutions are not held in the esteem that they were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
What do you make of those trends and how they affect your argument?
Yeah, and the word Jervis uses overdetermined.
Yes.
That peace is overdetermined. And other people will say too, maybe it's U.S. hegemony, maybe it's U.S. International presence playing the role of a cop that's keeping the amount of warfare down. Yeah, maybe and democracy though comes in waves. There's more democracy now than there was a generation ago, and there was more in which time there was more democracy than a generation before that. So it's not going back that far, hopefully. And nuclear deterrence is still there. International institutions, even though they're maybe being undermined, that also kind of comes in waves. Whether or not that's decisive. The ideas, however, haven't backtracked much. Like the Mueller-Pinker argument about the better angels of our nature, about us moving towards less acceptance of warfare in society, isn't changing much. Say what you want about Trump, and there's a lot that we could probably say about Trump. He is actively trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize and actively talks. The big thing that separates him from other tyrants of the past is he's not looking to expand, probably, although we're massing a lot of troops next to Venezuela. He is invested in peace like the fascists never were.
Right.
So, yeah, maybe this is all cyclical and we'll go back to a cycle of war again. But for the first time, there's at least a chance that we won't. There's reason to believe that maybe we've pushed war to the periphery of international politics, and where we're so horrified by something like Gaza and Ukraine is because it's the outlier. Will that invasion of Ukraine that so many people think the beginning of great power competition, the second Cold War, maybe, or it might be the last act in the first Cold War? Because, yeah, Vlad and his cronies are all Cold Warriors, and they think in terms of East and West, and maybe they're the last gasp of an earlier age rather than the first gasp of the new one. We'll see.
So there is a cycle, but it has a trajectory that slopes down.
Yeah, slopes in a positive direction.
All right. So
like peace.
If you're pro peace, and we hope
Yeah.
that you are, what should people like, a lot of students out there trying to figure out what to do with their lives. They want to have a life that's meaningful, and maybe they want to extend peace or justice or whatever it is. What do you think are the frontiers of the future of war? Because war affects both stability, peace, justice, trade,
Right.
things that people care about. What do you think we need to know to push that trajectory in a more positive direction?
I think it's helpful to know that it's working, that the overall process of pacification, and I don't want to overstate it, there's still a lot of problems in the world, and there's a lot of wars going on, but the progress is in a positive direction. When some people think that's sort of enervating to the peace community, that if people think, like, there's been a variety of political scientists have argued that if we start to buy into this Pinker argument that life is getting better, then we'll stop trying to make it better, that we'll just rest on our laurels. That's not the case. And I think human nature suggests that if you see some positive movement, if you see success and victory, you're going to keep going. That people shouldn't lose heart, in other words. There's a lot of depressing stuff in the world right now. At least in our field, there's reason to be less depressed than it would have been any time in the past, a couple generations ago. Go back to the Middle Ages in particular. They're all comparatively miserable compared to us. If you
Yeah.
told people in the Middle Ages people would be living routinely into their 80s
With teeth.
with teeth, with dental procedures,
Plumbing.
Novocaine,
Oh,
indoor plumbing,
public health.
yes, they would absolutely trade places with us in a second. But we're no happier than them. We're still miserable creeps because we just focus on the negative.
We evolved in scarcity.
Yeah, yeah, and things are better now. We just don't recognize it.
So actually, true story. Those of you following at home, behind me is a picture of Thomas Aiken's Gross Clinic with Dr. Samuel Gross in it. And my aforementioned father and I used to argue about this painting. It's a famous medical painting because the question is, this rock star clearly thinks well of himself, physician, getting a heroic picture being done of him. Is he killing the patient or is he saving him? Right? And the history of medicine, I mean, they all take the Hippocratic Oath, which is also behind you, if you behind me, if you
Huh?
could see it.
Yeah,
Is, it actually doesn't say first do no harm, but the basic idea is don't hurt people. You're there to help them.
right.
And for the first several thousand years, if
Yeah,
there's somebody that was going to hurt you, it was a doctor, right? They were a menace to society because they didn't know germ theory, they didn't know lots
right,
of things. And so lots of professionals go through life thinking that, well, I have good intentions, I must be good because I mean well,
right.
but often they don't. And it's around the time of that picture, around 1900, that
Yeah,
doctors stopped killing more people than they
yeah.
saved.
I've seen that stat.
And it
Yeah.
probably because of public health, not because of guys like Sam Gross.
And it's crazy to think that how crazy germ theory must have seemed to that guy and people like that these tiny things we can't see, that's the cause of all of our diseases.
Right.
It wasn't universally accepted right away, and it must have seemed pretty strange.
Well, I don't want to besmirch Sam. I just think Sam was cool with germ
He was
theory.
okay, yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah. But people of his
it's
generation,
look through here and see those little things. We think that's causing disease. That
yeah,
seems crazy to
yeah.
people.
So clearly a lot of things 100 years from now that
Yeah.
we're doing are going to look like Sam Gross to them.
And maybe we need a Hippocratic Oath for foreign policy
Well, I think everyone should take a Hippocratic Oath. The
yeah,
weird thing for me, though, is like great inflation hasn't really gotten to places like engineering or pre-med,
right.
where there seem to be to people.
They're weeding out.
They think, oh my God, if I don't build this bridge right, people could die, or if I do my job wrong, I could kill a patient. Whereas people don't understand that politics kills people wholesale in a way
Yeah.
that many other jobs kill them retail. And they really ought to pay more attention. Like, oh my God, what I'm doing is really important as a voter or as a thinker or a writer or even just a regular citizen talking about politics.
We
These things have life and death consequences.
we tend to think that the decisions that are made in the Oval Office and place and are out of our they're out of our scope to comment on or understand. There must be a reason why we're doing this. Citizens should be more engaged in why what our government is doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
Is it really necessary? It doesn't mean you stop listening to experts. It doesn't mean that your opinion is just as valid as other people's opinion.
Don't go hippie on me,
That's
Chris.
the
Yeah.
thing. But it's not the case that you have no efficacy at all. You have some. You can dig into this and learn about and for instance, we're amassing a lot of troops right outside of Venezuela because we're told we got to go after the drug cartels. There are no drug cartels in Venezuela. They're in Mexico. The fentanyl comes from Mexico. What the heck are we doing? So, these are the kinds of questions that are probably worth asking before we go wholesale into trouble.
Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to add before we sign off with another wonderful episode of Frontiers of International
I
Security?
think overall, the message that you're doing that the life is better off for more people now than ever before is a message that doesn't get out there and can maybe counteract some of the pessimism that is sweeping across the planet in a lot of ways for various reasons. Life is pretty good now. So maybe it's worth taking a moment to appreciate what we have.
And any projects or papers that you would love to see graduate students or undergrads write to help this trend continue?
I think anybody who studies, pretty much anybody in this university, thinks that what they study is the most important thing that there is. Anybody worth their salt thinks what they study is the most important topic.
Well, the world revolves around all of us, right?
Right. Yeah. The two most important questions: why are these peaceful trends happening, and how long will they last? So I'm like everybody else. I think what I study is the most important thing that we can study. If we can understand why war declined, we'll understand the trajectory, the future, where it's going. And there's been a lot of people trying to figure it out. So if you're a graduate student who has a Einsteinian kind of theory of everything that can put it all together, you're going to probably sell a lot of books.
Or win a Nobel. because
Or
that
maybe
could,
even get a PhD.
yeah.
And
I don't know
get a
which one's
job.
harder.
Thank
All right, Chris, thanks for coming.
you, Joe.
It was
Thank
a
you for
real
having
honor
me.
and a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Tune in next time for the Frontiers of International Security.